Hi guys, it's Miss Meyer with another episode of the Miss Meyer Show. Let's see if we can do. Oh, perfect. So it's Miss Meyer with another episode of the Miss Meyer Show, and once again I had to change locations because I am taping this on a Sunday, and my husband's home and he's watching Ghostbusters really loud in the front room, so I had to switch my location. So that's why it's here instead of where it usually is. So what we're going to do today is we're going to finish talking about chapter 7, because when we have class on Monday, we're going to be going into chapter 8. So what I want you to do is your guided notes are for this section. So I'm going to create guided notes for the next section on chapter 8 so that you can start to fill those out in class, but you won't be using them during the Miss Meyer Show because, we're talking finishing chapter 7. So we're going to do chapter 8 next week. Well, I'm probably confusing you. Okay, we're going to finish doing chapter 7 right now with the Miss Meyer Show. In class next week, we're going to start, or Monday, tomorrow, we're going to start on chapter 8. So I'm going to give you the guided notes for chapter 8, which won't be due this week, but you can start maybe filling them out if we go over something that you understand in class. I hope that makes sense. If not, I'll go over it again for you because, I am confusing myself. So I know I'm probably confusing you. So finish in chapter 7. We're talking about politics, how things are in the antebellum South. The Civil War is brewing. The whole kind of atmosphere in the South is changing. The Civil War is about to happen. And one of the big changes that we're going to see that really kind of contribute to the Civil War is politics. So during the antebellum period, politics was popular and often heated topic of discussion. In Louisiana, we had people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, different countries, different ethnicities, different beliefs, different customs, and here they were all trying to live together in this state. So for the Creoles, political debate was an altogether new activity. They had never, ever, had this before. They never dealt with this before. These Creole people that were coming, from Nova Scotia and the Acadians and all that, they had never experienced anything with this. They were always under the control of a monarch or a king. So now that we are part of the United States, that we are now an American society based, we are part of the country, the people of Louisiana now had the right to vote, which was something completely and totally new. A lot of people in America, they take for granted the privilege that we're able to vote and we're able to, participate in our government. In a lot of other countries, that's just not the case. And we really take for granted, that we have that right and that gift, really, to have a say in our government. So, Jacques Philippe Villiers, or Villiers. You've seen his name around Louisiana, and definitely in Chalmette, we know that we've seen that name. He became the first Creole governor, and after that, after him, several other Creoles were elected. Now, Creoles, the people that they were electing were not these, Creoles that were just kind of small farmers and things like that. These were very influential Creoles, people that had a lot of money, a lot of property. Those were the ones who were being elected. Jacques Philippe Villiers, he was not some, just, whatever Creole guy living in the bayou, whatever. He was not like that. This was a very well-to-do person, and as were the people that came after him. Now, political arguments in Louisiana, they range from cultural rivalries to political rights. People were angry about the state capitol. They thought it should be moved. Some fought about education. Some fought about transportation. There was just all kinds of issues. In Louisiana, there were so many different people and so many different ideas and thoughts and practices that there was going to be conflict that was going to erupt. When you have a bunch of people with a bunch of different ideas, if they don't have a good way to communicate and to share those ideas, you're going to have issues. Okay, you're just gonna have that. In Louisiana, I mean, really not in Louisiana, but, well, I guess so in Louisiana. But, okay, well, when you think about it, think about this. If you put in a room someone from Louisiana, someone from New York, someone from California, and someone from Kentucky, you're going to get a bunch of different ideas. These are people from different walks of life all over the country. There's going to be different thought processes, ideas, beliefs, values, and there could be some conflict. Well, all of that was kind of living in New Orleans and Louisiana at that time. You had the Isleños, the Creoles, the Cajuns, the French that were coming from, the reign of terror over in France. You had the people coming from America. You had Germans. You had Irish. You had all these people coming together with different thoughts and ideas trying to run this state. So there was going to be kind of things, or lots of things. Political factions formed quickly, meaning people started to agree with one side or agree with another, and we started to see political parties in the mix. This is where we start to see a lot of political parties. Today, with today's election, you see two main political parties. You see the Republicans and the Democrats. That was not always the case. When the antebellum South in Louisiana, that's when we start to see people grouping themselves together in political parties. So throughout the 1820s, politics were pretty tame. They were only really focused on, the stability of the state, improving the legal system, increasing economic activity. It wasn't like it is today. They were really just concerned in the 1820s on keeping Louisiana running. Okay, that's it, because we had just been admitted into the Union not too long before. Well, excuse me, in the 1830s, things heated up because there was a new political party that came into power, and this political party was called the Whig Party, W-H-I-G, Whig, and their whole goal was to oppose Andrew Jackson and his Democratic Party. Now, remember, Andrew Jackson was like, rough and tumble kind of guy. He was old hickory. He was not, he was not the establishment. He was not some rich, mucky muck and woohoo kind of guy. This was a guy that some people even had said that he was a buffoon. They called him an illiterate buffoon. I mean, he was not what people thought of. He was not part of the establishment. And so the Whig Party, they were formed to combat Jackson and the Democratic Party. The Whigs supported business. They supported industry. They supported state funding for construction of railroads and telegraphs and tariffs and trying to compete really, with the other countries. And they were very, very popular with the well-to-do citizens. They were the ones, these well-to-do citizens that had lots of money, had businesses, things like that. They liked the Whig Party. The Whig Party members were society's upper-class people. They were people who were educated. They were wealthier. They sent their kids abroad to go to school. In Louisiana, these were your big plantation owners, your Big Daddy LaBouffe, like in Princess and the Frog. Those were your Whig Party members. In Louisiana and other southern states, like I said, large plantation owners were usually part of the Whig Party. A sugar tariff became very important to the Whigs. Now, what is a tariff? A tariff is a tax on goods coming into our country. Now, the reason it was so important was because by doing this, by taxing sugar coming in from other countries into the United States, they would make that sugar cost more. And in effect, people would buy American-made sugar because it was cheaper, because they wouldn't have to offset the cost of the tariff of the sugar coming in. So the Whigs were very supported by the Louisiana big sugar plantation owners. They were the ones that were really supporting the Whig Party. The Whigs believed politics should be left to white men who owned property. So that not only left out, free African Americans, slaves, women, but it also left out poor white males. So if you only let rich white men vote, they're only going to vote for things that benefit rich white men. So that was where the Whig Party came into some serious problems, especially in Louisiana, because the majority of people in Louisiana were not very rich. They did not own these huge plantations with tons of slaves. They were pretty much your poor farmers. So here comes this political party that's saying, I want to take away this, I want to take away that, and I want to not even allow you to participate in government. You can imagine which political party was more popular in Louisiana. The Democrats, which was Andrew Jackson's people, or the Whig Party. You got to think about it. So the Whigs soon controlled Louisiana's politics because their governor, Jacques-Philippe Villiers, was a big-time rich guy. So, of course, he and his people are going to be taking over and running things. So the Whigs controlled Louisiana's politics with two successive governors, Andre Bienvenu Roman and Edward Douglas White. Okay? I'm trying to think. My grandmother's maiden name. Oh, it's not that. Okay, I was like, I'm thinking. I thought it was Bienvenue, but it's not. It looks kind of similar, but it wasn't. Well, anyways, so during this first administration of Roman, now first one was Roman. Roman had increased the number of banks. He had lots and lots of banks. The New Basin Canal, these are all things that's happened under Roman. That linked Lake Pontchartrain to New Orleans was built. The Pontchartrain Railroad was complete. And he spent more money on education. So he was doing a lot of things. But this is the problem. When you pass a lot of legislation and you build a lot of things and you start a lot of things, the problem occurs when you go to pay for it. How are you going to pay for that? Yes, railroads are important. Yes, transportation is important. Basins are important. Education is important, but you need to pay for it. Everything costs money. Well, when Roman was out of office, the guy who came in after him, Governor White, it didn't go very smoothly as Romans. The economic boom where people were making money was not enjoyed by Roman, and a panic struck. The economy slowed. People were losing all of their money. Banks were closing. Jobs were scarce. People were starving. And here's this guy saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for all this stuff? So White spent the last part of his term trying to manage a growing economic crisis. So these two governors, Roman and White, these both kind of Creole Whig Party governors in the very new Louisiana, state of Louisiana, were dealing with issues that were going to be very prominent into the Civil War. A lot of people think that the Civil War was only about slavery, and that's not true. While that was a main, not even really a main issue, honestly, that was a part. The main thing that they were fighting over in the Civil War was states' rights. It was not over, well, I guess, in a kind of way it was over slavery, but that was what they were fighting for, states' rights and money. That's what was the big issue, not freeing the slaves. That was something that came along with it, but that wasn't the number one thing. The number one thing they were fighting the Civil War over was states' rights, meaning the state has the right to do what they want. They don't have to follow the whole government. Okay? So after a decade of Whig rule, that's 10 years, a decade. That's how long I've been teaching, guys. I know, right? So after a decade of Whig rule, the Democrats returned to power because people in Louisiana were saying, we're tired of this. This is crazy. And that's what we see a lot in politics. So like after 8 years of President George W. Bush, who's a fabulous guy, lives here in Dallas. I've never met him, but I've seen him on TV, and he's always very kind and just really nice. Regardless of what you think of his politics, he was a really nice guy. Well, anyways, after 8 years of President George W. Bush, the people of America said, we don't want another Republican, we want a Democrat. And President Barack Obama won in pretty much a landslide. And so that's kind of what's happening here. After these actual, 12 years, because Roman served 2 terms and White 1. So after 12 years of having this governor who was in the Whig Party and, for all the Mucky Mucks, Big Daddy LaBeouf people, the people of Louisiana said that we had enough. We do not want any more Whig Party governors. We want a Democrat. And they elected Alexander Mouton. I'm probably saying his name wrong, but I'm going to call him Alexander Mouton or Mouton. Probably Mouton. That sounds more Louisiana. Well, Alexander Mouton became governor, and he wanted to change the state constitution because it favored the upper class, because they were the ones who wrote it. They were the ones who could read. A lot of these poor farmers live in Louisiana. They couldn't even read. They couldn't write their names. So when Louisiana drafted a constitution, when we became a state, or were becoming a state, it favored the ones who wrote it. And those who wrote it were your upper class, rich white guys. So when Mouton became governor, he said, we're changing it. We're changing it. Many Democrats at this time, like I said, were the poor farmers and laborers who had not even been allowed to vote. The most important event of Mouton's administration was the adoption of the new Constitution. Now, the Constitution of 1845 allowed all white men to participate in politics. All white men. But that didn't leave out, like I said, free African Americans, slaves, and women. Women, we were the very last ones to get the vote. We didn't get the right to vote until the 19th Amendment in the 1920s. So we were the last ones to actually have a say in our government. So the Constitution of 1845 allowed all men to participate because it got rid of the ownership requirements, meaning that you had to own property in order to vote. Well, these poor guys living in Louisiana, these poor farmers, a lot of them didn't have any property. They were pretty much sharecroppers, meaning they worked on someone else's property. So now with Mouton, they have the right to vote. And with having the right to vote, that meant that they could now not only have a say in their government, but they would start electing people that were favorable to them, because there's more of them. So that scared the Whig Party big time. It really, really, really frightened them. It really frightened them. Okay, the new Constitution of 1845 also increased the number of legislators, and it allowed voters to elect parish sheriffs and the governor. So that meant that now these people who had never really had a say in Louisiana, who were, in fact, the majority of Louisiana, now not only had the right to vote, but could also elect government officials. And now that they could do that, and there were more of them than there were in the Whig Party, they were going to elect people that were favorable to them. Well, the Whig Party is just, minds blown. They're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because now they're no longer in control. So the new Constitution abolished the old country system, got rid of it. The way Louisiana was, got rid of it. And they left Louisiana with, now we only had parishes. Remember, we had counties and parishes. Now we only have parishes. It created a superintendent of education. It provided free public education for whites only, and usually white males, not girls. And it outlawed all types of gambling and lotteries. So I'm going to get rid of all that too. So in a backlash against the Whigs, which they wanted to get back at the Whigs, the new Constitution restricted business. It prohibited the legislature from chartering banks or loaning money to companies for internal improvement. It didn't say that you couldn't run a business, but it said the government couldn't run a business. So all these kind of banks, these government-run banks like, White had done and all that kind of stuff, they said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to do that. We're just getting rid of it all. Well, like I said, the Whigs were, they were angry. Okay, they were very, 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 very angry. One of the big things in the Constitution of 1845 was that they decided that it was time to move the state capital. Now, at this time, in the antebellum Louisiana, the state capital was not Baton Rouge. It was New Orleans. That was your big hub. That's where all of your activity took place. That's where banking took place. That's where trade took place. That's where people went in and out of and all these other kinds of things. And it would also a place of fun for a lot of people, So it was the main hub, and that was why it was our capital. Well, the Constitution of 1845 said that it was unfair for one city to be the state's commercial, social, and political center. It was not fair to the rest of the state. So another problem is that politicians would, go to New Orleans to vote and to do things, and they would get swept up in all the bad things that were there. All the corruption, the pirating, the ladies of ill repute, the gambling and the just drinking and all that kind of stuff. So they were really, really against that. They said, we want to get rid of that. Remember, it also had outlawed gambling and I guess lotteries, and in New Orleans, that was still going on. It was on the down low, but it was still going on. And they were fearful that the politicians, the ones that they elected, were going to get involved and entrapped in that whole system. So they thought that the legislature would be more productive if the capital city were located somewhere else. For a little while, they moved it to Donaldsonville, and they hated it. They absolutely hated the move. They moved back to Louisiana. Back to New Orleans. So it was still in New Orleans. They had tried to move it before, but they moved it to somewhere that was so remote that people didn't even really understand or know where to go or where it was, who had ever heard of it. Even today, I bet some of you don't even know where Donaldsonville is, unless you live there, which if you do, awesome. It was once the capital. But they decided they're going to permanently move it out of New Orleans. They're going to move it. So much of the Constitution of 1845 was a Democratic victory, but the Whigs made one important gain. The Constitution required the number of state senators to be proportioned or based on the entire population. And what that meant was the entire population. Okay, well, the entire population of Louisiana included a huge majority of slaves. And with this Constitution of 1845, it now said that slaves could be counted as a part of the population. And what they mean by representatives means that the state of Louisiana would get as many representatives as was in that population. Now, this is how it affected the Whigs and why it was so important for them. It said that legislatures could be elected, the number of them, based on population, okay? So if they were allowing slaves to be counted as people towards population, they were not allowing them to vote. They were just allowing them to be counted. So let's say you have two individual counties, okay? You have County A right here, where you have, let's say, maybe 20 plantation owners, and each plantation owner had 100 slaves. So that would be 2,000 people in this population. And let's say over here you have a population of 400, and they're poor farmers, okay? So here, even though in County A or Parish A, you have, Tigger's wants to get in on the action. Tigger, get out of the way! Get out of the way, Tigger! Come on, Tigger. Come on. Come on over here. Get over here. Come on. You're interrupting me. I'm going to lose my chain of thought. Get out of here. Come over here. Come over here. Come over here, Tigger. Okay, so you have County A with 2,000 people, of which only 20 are allowed to vote. And then you have over here, Parish B, with 400 people, which are all allowed to vote. Which one's going to have the more of a legislature representation? The one with the more people, even though only 20 of them can vote. And those 20 that can vote, they're going to elect a representative who is favorable to the Whig Party. And since the counties that these rich Whig members were more populated due to the slaves, they would have more of a say in government. And I'm going to explain that in class too, because I don't know if you guys can totally understand what I'm talking about. But that created a problem. So this meant that plantation-rich areas where there were big plantations, lots of slaves, they would have more representatives in the state Senate. And a parish with, let's say, 10,000 slaves and 500 whites, for example, would have the same representation as a parish with 10,000 whites and 500 slaves. So it was not really fair, and it was kind of like a loophole. So that was creating a problem. But like I said, I will go over that in class because I don't think I explained it completely properly. So more changes in the government were going on. The Democratic governor, now a new Democratic governor comes around. His name is Isaac Johnson. And he finally was the one that moved the capital from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. And he named, 4 years after the state constitution was ratified, Johnson and other state officials transferred the state government. They spent $100,000, which at that time was like $100 million, to create the state capital into this Gothic castle-looking thing that it's kind of there today, but it's not the state capital that we have today, but it was back then. You could still visit it, but it's not the one we use. So they used a lot of money doing that in Baton Rouge. The Constitution of 1852 was in regards to the growing dissent over the Constitution of 1845. Everybody was angry eventually. Everybody was arguing, saying, we don't like this part, we don't like that part. It was just constant bickering and back and forth. So just like, if you have some decision in your household and, your mom says, okay, these are the house rules. Joey, you need to clean the bathroom and clean down the toilet. Jenny, you need to scoop the litter out of the litter box. Well, Jenny says, that's not fair. And Joey says, oh, it's not fair. And so mom says, okay, let's change it. We'll fix it. We'll do it a little bit differently. So just like that, the Constitution of 1852 was to kind of make peace and try to go with it. The Whigs resented this new Constitution, the old Constitution, excuse me. They didn't like that the business changes to business, changes to all those kinds of things. The Democrats didn't think changed things enough, and they didn't get as much as they would have wanted. So they came up with this new Constitution. So the new Constitution provided for elections rather than appointments of state officials, more elections. So more, they can't say, okay, I'm going to appoint this guy to this secretary of this one, and this guy ahead of this one. They made more people have to actually be elected. Judges, police chiefs, things like that, okay? It made it legal for the legislature to extend loans and to banks in other countries. So it allowed some government involvement in companies and business, because in the Constitution of 1845, it said that they could not do that. Well, now in the Constitution of 1852, they can do that to some degree. Okay? It also stated that the number of legislatures in the House of Representatives will be based on total population, but everybody in the Senate would get 2 votes. Okay? So kind of like what was going on in what had happened already over in, America at that time. But you have to think, Louisiana was just becoming a state. We were ruled by France and Spain for the majority of the time. So all these new things, these new representatives and elections and appointments, these are all new to us. So while the people living in the original 13 colonies were like, get with it, Louisiana, we were saying, we don't even know what's going on. Kind of like, they changed everything. I'm telling you, I know your parents probably feel the same way, but math has changed so much from when I was in college, even in high school. So when my 13-year-old daughter brings home math homework and I'm sitting there trying to figure it out, and she's like, Mom, you don't know how to do this? I'm like, no, I've never experienced this before. I have no idea. So that's what was like the people in Louisiana at this time. All these people are like, Louisiana, what's your deal? And we're like, what do you mean what's our deal? We've never even experienced this. So that's what was going on with us. So by the mid-1850s, slave owners were really increasing in population, and they pretty much started to control the state government because they were in ways that were legal and illegal. We start to see more and more of these big plantation owners having more and more of a say in our government as the time went on. So, slavery, though, at this time started to split the nation. This was when the issue started to come around. When the Northern and Southern Whigs could not agree, okay, because remember, the Whig Party was your rich people. And there were Whigs, it was not just in Louisiana, there were Whigs all throughout the United States. Well, the Northern Whigs were your very wealthy people who became wealthy on industry, building things, railroads, roads, bridges, things like that, companies. Your Southern Whigs were ones who became rich farming, plantation, on the backs of slave labor. So when slavery started to become this big issue, especially after Uncle Tom's Cabin went into print and things like that, the Northern Whig Party was saying to the Southern Whig Party, you are not right. Your money is not as good as our money because we earned ours doing what was good and not on the backs and pain of other people. So the Whig Party drifted apart and it pretty much disappeared from Louisiana. A large part of the slave owners decided to join the Democratic Party, but differences still existed and there were issues with that as well. So the Whig Party in Louisiana, once slavery became a big issue, really disappeared out of Louisiana because it was just too much of an issue. So the Democratic governor Paul O. Hebert and Robert C. Wickliffe, they finished out the antebellum period. Hebert was graduate from West Point. He was an engineer. He was a Mexican War veteran. He pretty much continued with the internal improvements. They enlarged the state school for the deaf, the mute, and the blind. They did lots of good things, but with the South's rights and defending states' rights and defending, slavery and our ability to do that, these antebellum governors who were all about preserving Louisiana and making us run well as a state were not the ones being elected after Wickliffe. The ones that were now being elected were ones who were really fighting for states' rights, fighting for the issues that the Civil War was getting ready to be fought for. So the antebellum era of Louisiana ended once we start to see the Civil War start to come around. Once we see people starting to think about, hey, states' rights and the issue of slavery and Abraham Lincoln's election and all these things were happening. So people weren't in Louisiana, they weren't focused on, hey, let's improve Louisiana. They were focused on, hey, we want to have our rights as being a state. We want the right to be able to do some things. So that's when we start to see all that antebellum changes and a lot of the improvements start to kind of focus on the Civil War and the changes that would definitely bring. So that is all I've got for you guys today. I will see you in class tomorrow, or when you're watching this on Tuesday. So I will see you in class on Monday. I will have already seen you in class. So have a great rest of the week, guys. I will see you later. Adios. Vivian, what's the code word?
Ariel.
Ariel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, say